Welcome back to the Horror Academic, and as promised, this time around we're going to be talking about George Romero's Monkey Shines. Another one of his unfortunately oft forgotten films from the later half of his career. Like last episode's picture, The Dark Half, this is part of a different, kind of a middle zone in Romero's career, where he's working with Orion Pictures. This is part of a kind of stab at the mainstream. And not so much a going Hollywood kind of way, but working with bigger budgets, having access to maybe name actors, those types of things. He's taking that step up from the more grassroots approach to filmmaking that we are more familiar with in his work. This period also is important because it marks the end of one producer relationship and the start of a new. So we've talked before about the fact that Romero worked with Richard Rubinstein for a good chunk of his career, the kind of Laurel Entertainment period of his career. But this film marks the entrance of a new producer, Peter Grunwald, who will have a very important role in the second half of Romero's career. But here we see this kind of emergence with Orion because of a common ground producer that they are both working with. This is also an interesting piece for Romero because this is the first time he's kind of hired to adapt someone else's work and it's not attached to Stephen King. All of his other times where he's been kind of tied to a book being transferred over to film has always been King. And all of his other stories obviously have been kind of his own stories. So this is an interesting situation for him because he's adapting someone else's work and it's someone he doesn't know. The author of the book, as you can see here, is Michael Stewart. I picked this up a while back at a convention in a bin. Peter Grunwald had read the book and really liked it and had worked to get the rights to adapting it. So that's where he's kind of recommended, oh, well, think about George Romero, maybe he would be a good fit for that. So the two of them are paired in that way. And it becomes a great partnership for them. And it really kind of like pushes things bigger and bigger for Romero on his end, which will eventually lead to him leaving Pittsburgh, going up to Canada and Toronto area and making Land of the Dead. So, but for right now, this is kind of the beginning of the end of that original part of his career where he's working out of Pittsburgh. And this is also, we see there are a lot of familiar faces, familiar names in the credits. To start with, Christine Forrest, Romero at the time, Christine Forrest, she plays the nurse in the film, so that's a strong tie to the past and to his present at the time. Of course, Christine and him, somewhere after the Orion period, I believe, is their breakup. But what we see here also is Tom Savini is back on board. We have Greg Nicotero working with him and his team. Everett Brutnell is also part of this team, and they're responsible for making not just kind of the typical physical effects you'll see in a horror film, but as we'll see, the monkey of Monkey Shines is kind of maybe 50% fake monkeys, thanks to Savini and their team. So the story of Monkey Shines, this Michael Stewart novel, the story of Monkey Shines, is about Alan. Alan is a law student. He's a very athletic man. He seems to have kind of the whole world laid out in front of him. And one day he's injured in an awful accident while running. He wakes up from surgery to find out that he is now paraplegic and he is confined to a chair. The wheelchair has to be electronic so that he can move it with a control unit from his mouth, like a remote control. So his best friend Jeffrey is a scientist working in a lab. He's doing experiments with monkeys, and he's trying to make them more intelligent, or to express their intelligence better, I should say. So he's using samples of brain tissue from a human specimen to enhance these monkey test subjects. So we kind of see these parallel. We have Alan, who's gone through this horrible accident, and we have, at the same time, Jeffrey being kind of pressured from the academic lab setting that he works within to have results. And part of that results would be to have to prove that he has been able to make this monkey smarter. So between the two, there is this kind of concept of, well, there's this organization that trains monkeys to help quadriplegics. And so he goes out, he talks to a woman who runs a ranch that trains the monkeys, and kind of says, well, what if we use a monkey that I provide if I can assure that it hasn't been tampered with in any way, and it has a clean bill of health? So she agrees. They go through the process of training this monkey, bringing it to Alan kind of almost as like sort of a present, like, hey, we have this solution for you, and you know, all the functions that you can't do, this monkey's going to help you out. It's going to be great. And through this process, the monkey and Alan, the monkey, by the way, is named Ella, which is short for the type of monkey that she is, which at this time, I'm going to have to put that right about here because that's a long word that I can't remember how to say. And I am not going to try to say it. So, so Ella and Alan bond, much to the chagrin of the nurse that is taking care of Alan, who does not get along with the monkey. Kind of a bit of a nurse scratch, it doesn't really get along with anybody, and that's Chris Forrest's part. There's some montaging of, Ella becoming more and more useful, and Alan and her understanding how to work all the rigged up stuff in the house together, and, the nurse in the corner kind of, so, at the same time, we have a couple of other kind of outlier, kind of antagonistic characters, including Alan's mother, who is very overbearing, and ends up at some points trying to be there to help, but only hindering, kind of leading to him being further into a funk. And then coming back later, once the nurse has completely given up because she can't handle not only Alan's attitude, but Ella, and she just kind of makes things worse kind of exponentially. And then we also have Alan's ex-girlfriend, who was his girlfriend when he had the accident and couldn't deal with everything that happened afterwards, and his rather cocky, very 80s yuppie doctor who was like kind of the wunderkind surgeon who supposedly saved him from everything. So we have these characters who are all kind of adding to Alan's kind of temperament at times, frustrating him even further. But eventually, Alan, though, really works well with Ella and Melody, the trainer who keeps coming to the house to help make sure everything's okay and work on Ella. And eventually the two of them obviously form an attraction because it's in a movie, there's always an underlying romance. So you have this budding relationship and all this. Everything seems to be going much better. But, of course, it's a horror film. You got George Romero to come make it. So things go awfully wrong in the end, and we have, a monkey gone amok. We realize in all of this that Ella and Alan have this tremendous bond that gives him the ability to see through her eyes. There's something about the serum that elevates her connection with him, that he can see her breaking out of his house at night and running, and it's giving him the sensation of running. Ella's at this point getting so smart that she's kind of affecting him as much as he's affecting her. And it gets kind of scarily close. The more angry Ella starts to act out for him, kind of as an extension of him, doing the things that are kind of like his worst desire, right? Like his violent tendencies are coming out in Ella. But she is in some way, because of her interaction with the drug, the serum that Jeffrey's given her, are enhancing all of that. So she's projecting evil onto him, kind of, I guess you could say. She's making all of those evil thoughts seem more possible. So Ella, becomes the evil entity that can act out Alan's worst case thoughts, or worst laid plans, shall we say. And that's really where kind of the terror of it comes, until Alan fully comes to the realization of what's happening and understands finally that he is being manipulated emotionally to trigger those violent tendencies, and he tries to take a stand against her from a chair. And probably to me, the scariest moment in the film is once it's become apparent what's happening, once he understands that Ella is killing, and killing for him. If he has a horrible thought, she acts it out. So if he wishes someone's dead, Ella's there to do it. But once he realizes this is what's happening, he has to be afraid of the idea of Ella knowing that he knows. And there's a really, to me, like I said, the most terrifying moment is Alan's left in bed by himself. He's screaming for help. Jeffrey just happens to come by because he starts to realize what's going on as well. So he wants to go check in. What he finds is the power's out in the house, and no one's answering. Finds Alan in his room in bed, checks in on him. All right, so are you okay in here? Ella's not here with you, right? And he's like, no, she's not. And then once Jeffrey closes the door, Alan says, I don't think she is. And it pulls out. And he is in an island that is his bed, stranded in a space that he cannot get to safety from. And that, to me, it's like, because it puts that, you know, most likely that she's not in that room because you're just as sure as him until the door is closed and kind of the fear is real, and he realizes how alone he is and how much he can't do anything to get out of that situation. And that's to me, like, that's what's scary about this film, those kinds of moments. A lot to be said about all these types of things. One thing I can say, Romero, much like he said with the Dark Half, is when it comes to adapting it, one of the things that he really wanted to bring out is kind of this Jekyll and Hyde kind of side in people, which is kind of like a recurring theme we're seeing, right? So is it the Jekyll and Hyde in Alan? Because he knows he has a bad side, because we can see it seething up in him, and that's what Ella's feeding off of. But at the same time, he's a really good guy otherwise. Or is it kind of, is Alan's Hyde Ella? So we have these kind of, he's playing with these, juxtaposing these concepts of split personality and projecting that personality onto someone else, or, you know, another monkey. So that's what's interesting to me about Romero as the person who's adapting in this case. He says he wants to do his best to stay as true to the written word and bring that story out, but sometimes there's things he has to change. The ending seems fairly up in the air as to which version is closest to the book, but the real kind of killer of this whole thing is that there is a different ending completely that was originally filmed. And he goes on again on this film, as much as in the last one we talked about, how much he hates test audiences. And he's not the only director that I've heard have these kind of sentiments. It sounds like an awful, stupid process for this kind of thing. But everybody pretty much said that what they didn't like about the movie was the ending. So Orion Pictures says, scrap the ending, start over, make another ending. And so he has to chop off an ending where, you know, everything's fine. He wakes up in the end. It's, you know, out of a nightmare, he wakes up, and, you know, we then see the kind of the head of Jeffrey's chemistry department as kind of this kind of evil, mad scientist figure who battles through there's this kind of constant background of kind of PETA-like protesters, because they know that they're working on animals in there. So he wades through that crowd to go, and you find out that he has kind of mass-produced what, you know, Jeffrey comes up in his serum. But that ending scrapped. The audiences didn't like it. So he had to come up with a whole new ending. So of course now we've completely veered away from the book to kind of find the pleasing ending for the producers. And that is the ending that we see in the film now, which is a little simpler and a little bit more of a happy ending. But what he is told, what Romero is told, is that you need, much like we see in Friday the 13th, we need a Carrie style ending. We need that last jump scare to get them kind of screaming on their way out the theater. So he has to add that kind of moment, which is a little bit ridiculous, but it's also, again, turns out to be a nightmare and dream sequence. So all that to say, it's interesting to find out that refilming the end of this film of Monkey Shines is why Romero was not able to do Pet Sematary, which I hadn't really put two and two together before. And I know I've watched these extras, the documentaries on this disc before too. It's just, I guess it had been a couple years and I didn't remember. But so yeah, he couldn't match the timing for the production schedule for Pet Sematary because Orion had to go back in and redo the end of Monkey Shines. So that's frustrating. But go back 2 episodes, we got a really good movie out of Pet Sematary either way, with Mary Lambert directing. So maybe it's for the best, and this was meant to be. And I don't know who else could have done the dark half. So it all works out in the end. Interestingly enough, I will say before we get into kind of the nuts and bolts of who else is there, that the conversations in the kind of documentary are not as kind of anti-Orion at this point, where I felt last film he really was saying like this relationship isn't working out. In this, it's more like, well, they're fairly hands off because we're making it for a producer, and the producer is then handing it over to Orion. And they don't really seem to step in until it comes to kind of the end of the process. So just to note that compared to kind of the story of the making of the dark half. So what I would say, like I started to say before, we do see these kind of recurring figures of Romero's past here. I had mentioned the special effects team, but also you see the Andersons back. That's Cletus Anderson and Barbara Anderson, the production design and costume design team that works on many of Romero's films. We also see the return of editor Pascal Buba, who does an excellent job with this film, and he's very proud of this kind of 2-film combo with Orion Pictures of this work that is just works very well and is kind of up on that. Many people who, I guess, on like the production side of it, like Nick Otero says the same thing. It's like we had money, we weren't kind of shoestring about it. We had enough money to do what we needed to do these times around. So that's a kind of a good thing in this period as well. Like I say, this middle period, as it were. So 1988 for this film. This is the second to last film in Pittsburgh, and we also see, like I said, kind of this scale up in the cast, where we have in Jason Beek, I believe that's how you say his name. He's a fairly new name for a lead character, especially the film really relies on him in many ways. He's more of a television guy at this point. He's only had a few things under his belt. He's working on more things, but and he credits this film as kind of launching his career, making it that much bigger. But as far as other, shall we say, genre works he did, we have Full Eclipse in 93, Runaway Virus in 2000, and One Missed Call in 2008. He does have a small role, like really small role, in X-Men First Class from 2011, where he plays the character XO. But so yeah, he's not really a genre guy, and I think that's what we see and maybe this is not so for those outside of genre. When we mean like bigger names, it tends to be that you're pulling from people who particularly make dramas or even thrillers, as opposed to horror and science fiction. It's not their standard fare. So, like I said, 90% of his career is television work. Then we have John Pankhou, who plays Jeffrey. He's huge. He has a massive career, but only a few genre films again. He does The Hunger in 1983, the small part in that, and Batteries Not Included in 87. But here's another guy. He does a lot of thrillers. He does a lot of indie films. In fact, it was his role in To Live and Die in LA is what grabs Romero's attention. He knows he wants to work with him. So that's a big one. Kind of like rounding out the three primary characters is Kate Mcneil, who plays Melanie, the monkey trainer. She really has, she's more of a television actress as well, but far more on the drama side. One of her first roles is House on Sorority Row from 1982. But aside from that, that's not, there's no other genre work besides Monkey Shines. In fact, Romero says that he had seen her in one of the TV miniseries, North and South. But looking at her resume, it might be the second volume of North and South. And he really loved her performance in that and wanted to work with her from there. We also see like Stanley Tucci in this film, someone else that Romero also really wanted to work with, and he knew as a person and as an actor, and you know, and Tucci, of course, his resume is massive. So, but that's really like the core of it, and these are not typical genre actors, right? And that's part of this kind of where we see this kind of moving away from independent cinema. Aside from Stanley Tucci, I also wanted to briefly mention Janine Turner, who plays the kind of ex-girlfriend in this. She's, yeah, Northern Exposure, all that. She's also a great actress, but she's not, I don't think she's a primary role. But again, someone with a massive resume, so I'll leave it at that. So really, the story of making this film is this long process, long arduous process of kind of not just adapting a work, but then finding the way to make that work happen. And a part of that process is going to the Helping Hands is the name of the organization that helps to train monkeys for these tasks to help quadriplegics, and kind of working with them and talking to them and saying, well, this is what we're doing, and you know, we'd love to have your help, and kind of help to tell this story. So they work with them, they work with a couple of the monkeys that are trained by them to help do certain tasks for the film. Kind of in the end, there was only really maybe the trainer's monkey, it sounds like, who I believe was Mango, who is kind of the star of the film, but it's not meant to be Ella. And then really in the end, and Savini says it outright, you know, I saved this picture. I saved Romero on this picture by making fake monkeys. And that's really what it comes down to, is quite a bit of it that's specific and demanding is mechanical animatronic monkeys that Nicotero and Brutno work on, and there's also kind of monkey parts, monkey arms for POV shots, you know, things like that can just be kind of part of a shot. There's really fun kind of like having to make massive props to go with monkey arms so that the monkey arms are kind of equatable in size. But I think this is really between Savini and his team doing all of that design work to come up with a way to make realistic looking you know, fake monkeys. I really think Pascal Buba talks about you know, this film in the end, he's really happy with it because it looks seamless, it looks organic. It looks like he didn't sit there and have to take all of these different types of elements to make it all, it just flows. So whereas yes, the effects team is definitely responsible for a lot of this, I really feel that this is a film where the editing shines. And Romero and Grunwald talk about the whole, like, you know, having to do things over and over and over, just get a monkey to do something you wanted to do for it, it would never do the same thing twice, and blah 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 blah. So as a director, I feel like it's almost distracting when he has to work with the monkey, because that's all you can focus on, is getting the monkey to do what it needs to do. But he also talked about how, you know, working with the actors, he was just really impressed by their ability to take it places and to do different things and really kind of make it their own. And so, you know, this is one of those things about Romero, even as he moves away from working with lesser known actors and working with, he's still giving that same amount of room to breathe to a collaborator he doesn't know as well. And I think that's what marks him as his directing style. Like we've talked about this, I know we talked about this with Dark Half, he looks at it as like a team effort and everyone is contributing. So he is not the master of the set, he's just the guy who's kind of holding the keys, you know? So I think it's a great collaborative film in many ways, but the editing to me really shines in this film. So, but I haven't really told you like why I really do love this film. I mean, I've always loved this film. I just think it's just a smart movie, and it's not schlocky in a way that, say this had been a Tales from the Crypt episode, you could see where it could have gone that way easy, right? Like, guy stuck in a chair, canted angles, he's, angry at the world, and, this evil monkey is doing his horrible deeds. It has that possibility of being that kind of over the top, but it doesn't go there. For much of the film, it's a very human story. And I really appreciate that, and that's what another thing that Romero does well, is these are stories about people, and these are people put in strange and challenging situations, and that's, I think, what I love about it, is it's the story that is in some way believable, with a slight hint of kind of maybe like the surreal, or kind of almost a science fiction bend to it, like, well, what if we manipulate, what if science goes too far, And I think we do see some of that. There is a little bit of that kind of Frankenstein warning of, is man manipulating animal going to turn into something awful? And, this is a good case for that. I found it interesting to find out, and I hadn't really thought about that maybe as a teenager watching this film, but as an adult reading that, it had protesters. And it wasn't PETA, which I had assumed. It was organizations for people who were wheelchair bound, feeling that the ad campaigns for the film made it, that it would put them in a poor light, that they were helpless, that, and the evil overtones. Anytime you add a horror movie to you're gonna someone's gonna be mad about how you depict it. But I thought that was interesting, and I'm not sure how wheelchair-bound people feel about it today. That would be interesting to find out for me. I would like to know if people are upset about the end result, or were upset based on what they saw from the ad campaign. Were people, once the film was viewable and were seeing it, going, oh, okay, well, maybe it's not doing that. Maybe it is showing that he can kind of strive to take care of himself. I don't know. But that'd be an interesting way to update this film, is to kind of see what the kind of end result opinion was from that audience. Just a thought. There is a lot of this film that is shot in ways that are more, it does have, in some ways, it's strange I made the kind of Tales from the Crypt side of it, but on the other side, in a comic book type way, there is a lot of showing instead of telling a story through images, which is very comic book like, and what we are always told to do in video mediums, which is to, instead of using massive lengths of dialogue, just show it happen. And there's so many things, especially in the opening montage, where you learn who Alan is. You learn that he is this, kind of like perfect person. Like, like he's got this perfect physique. He's got like the perfect girlfriend. He has the perfect life, and everything changes in the drop of a hat. So in that sequence in particular, there's almost no dialogue. There is no dialogue really, and it just kind of tells that story well. Kind of in that kind of fairly montaged kind of approach. So I appreciate that in the storytelling. When you can show as opposed to tell is always a very important thing in a filmmaking kind of in the repertoire of what you see from a director's eye. Telling that story out of their head visually. So I really appreciate that in this film. I like that this film has not just that humanistic perspective, but also like most of Romero films, it has that kind of sense of humor about it, which I really, really appreciate at times. The character of Jeffrey jokes around a lot. He's a chemist, I guess you'd say. He's a scientist, a chemist, who's also a junkie. And there's lots of jokes. And, he's hiding things in his jokes. But at the same time, there's a lot of humor in, the first time he sees Alan once he's home, after his surgery, and he's like, oh, well, yeah, and I get all the best parking spaces. You know, it's this kind of wrong sense of humor at times that lightens the mood, and for something that had been so heavy, right? You know, and it's like, okay, yeah, you don't have to be so serious about it all. Is that fair? I mean, it's a way of saying you have to laugh, right? When life gets that bad, you just have to laugh. And I think that there's a lot of like that again. It adds to that kind of human side that you don't necessarily see in characters from you know, other horror films that I think you see in Romero characters. So again, I appreciate that. I love the story. I love Savini's effects work. I love the kind of the showdownness of at the end, but builds such a you know, you grow to like these characters, and you want to see them come out of it alive. You want to see them survive. So you know, it does get you you know, you're wrapped up in all of it, and I appreciate that. But there is some really great moments visually that are stunning. You know, this is great cinematography work, and like I said, to me this is an editor's film. I guess also there's some similarities in the kind of plot device as we saw in Dark Half, that we will see in Dark Half when it comes out, you know, year or two later, a few years later, is this kind of MO of someone acting out for you, much like we saw with Thad, where Thad had these awful thoughts, so his alter ego goes out and takes care of it for him, and that's pretty much what Ella does for Alan. So that's an interesting kind of tie between these two films too. We see, like I said, there's like Savini calls it monkey vision, those POV shots from the monkey that are kind of tracking shots and moving shots that give the sensation of movement that, you know, Alan cannot have on his own right now. So I like the visceralness of those scenes. There's this kind of moment where Jeffrey tries to bond with Ella to find out more and understand her and what is happening. So he kind of overdoses on the serum he's giving her and has this kind of trip. And that trip is kind of the way that's filmed is, you know, that's kind of classic, almost like a creep show segment, the way that's filmed. And I really love kind of the perspective shift and change there. And you are seeing two men's stories throughout this. The Jeffrey story is very different than Alan's story, but they're both so tied. You know, it's what, that's the progress of this story, is to seeing how these two men kind of get through their own crises. So overall, I mean, it's a great film for storytelling, for special effects, for editing, and for characters. What we're able to see, and then of course, you know, you have this, like I said, there's this showdown moment. This kind of Alan trying to coax Ella into his lap so that he can fight back because he's the only one left. That's excruciating, that whole sequence. It's because, you know, he can't do more, and he wants to, and he's thinking about it, and he's trying to force his body just to be able to fight back and to take her out, and in the end he does, and it's triumphant, and you kind of feel it with him, but it's over the top. It's so crazy. But you know, that's kind of what you're leading up to, right? All right, so let's talk a little bit about the versions that I have. I have the original DVD. I did have it on video. Of course, I don't have my videos anymore. I don't know if I've never seen a Laserdisc on this one. My copy is signed by Chris Forrest and Tom Savini. So, good stuff. Like I said before, I have the novelization. Also, so the Blu-ray special edition. This is one of those, like I said last time with Dark Half, it's a special edition. It doesn't say it's a special edition. So that's a pain. But when you read it up, I mean, it's a Scream Factory, Shout Factory, Scream Factory edition, so you know it's going to be deluxe. Let's see, we have audio commentary. We have an Experiment in Fear, which is another Red Shirt production, which looks back. The primary speakers in this one are Romero, Savini, Grunwald, You hear from all of the primary actors, and you also have Nicotero and Brutnell, so you have the effects team. They go through everything, all the trials and tribulations, trying to get all the actors together. The issue with the score, Romero had worked with Mancini to have him do it, and then Orion kind of ixnayed that and brought in David Shire, I believe, to do the score. So you have all these little kind of missteps. It's a really tight documentary, a retrospective piece that I like. So you have that. You also have you have the alternate ending, the deleted scenes, and the behind the scenes footage from back then, the vintage EPK, the electronic press kit, like we talked about last time, theatrical trailer, TV spot. As far as the deleted scenes, they did shoot brain surgery sequences where you see the girl whose brain they're using to make the serum. Those scenes were actually really well done. Not sure why they dropped that. That was obviously not Romero, or not his choice to do. But yeah, so definitely pick this up. It's a great addition. Highly recommend. And basically the moral of the story of the making of documentaries, working with monkeys, was not easy. So, all this to say, Monkey Shines is a great movie. If this is that period that most people forget about, or didn't, particularly if you weren't around in the video store days when this was sitting on the shelf, you might not have known about to kind of go out and get. Check it out. It's a great movie. I think you'll enjoy it. If you're a fan of Romero, I think you'll enjoy this one too. So yeah, that's it for this time around. So if you haven't seen Monkey Shines, totally check it out. Highly recommend. And thanks for hanging out with me today, and we will see you next time on The Horror Academic. Thanks. Hey, so I almost forgot to mention the big elephant in the room on this movie, just like Dark Half actually, which was why wasn't it the huge smash hit they expected it to be, right? Like, why wasn't this the movie to totally push Romero into like the mainstream? And really the answer comes down to marketing. When you hear the interviews, it's like, my cat has an opinion. It's not the right campaign. It doesn't portray the movie well. Romero he's not keen on the poster art. The tagline, like I said, it gets him in trouble with protesters. It's just really, they kind of dropped the ball on getting the message out there. Because here it is, it's a movie with a great cast, great effects, it's really scary stuff. Should have done great. Becomes a sleeper hit, I guess you could say, when you get to like the rental market. But yeah, not really the big push that they expect. So unlike the Dark Half, where it really comes down to Orion kind of falling apart as a company, here it's like Orion didn't do the proper push in their marketing campaign to correctly get this film out to the public. So didn't want to forget to mention that. Thanks guys, I'll see you next time.